Welcome to the Goodyear City Council meeting. We're excited to have you be a part of this important public process. Tonight, you will have the opportunity to address City Council on both non-agenda and agenda items. The agendas and the speaker request cards are located on the tables outside of council chambers. You must fill out a speaker card in order to address the City Council. Please hand in your completed card to the City Clerk before the start of the meeting. If the meeting has already begun, please hand it to any City staff. You may also check the I do not wish to speak option on the card. This allows you to still voice your opinion on an item on the record without having to speak. Public comment on a non-agenda item will take place during the citizen comment portion of the evening. These are items that don't appear on tonight's formal agenda. The City Clerk will call your name when it's time for you to speak. At that time, please approach the podium and state your name for the record. We ask that you speak clearly into the microphone. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes, and there is a timer visible from the podium. When the light changes from green to yellow, your time is coming to an end. When the light turns red, your time is up. Note that you may also choose not to speak if other speakers before you have said what you wanted to say. Shouting, cheering, and loud noises will not be tolerated, and violators may be removed for disrupting the meeting. Goodyear City Council meetings stream live on Facebook and YouTube, and online at goodyearaz.gov. Thank you for your participation in tonight's meeting.
Order for February 7th, 2022. Please join Councilmember Loretano in the Pledge of Allegiance invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear Lord, thank you for your great love and blessings for our lives. Thank you for your favor that has no end, that lasts for our entire lifetime. We ask for your guidance so that we might fully walk in your blessings and goodness today. We ask that your face would shine on us, that you would open the right doors for our lives and for our loved ones, and that you close the wrong doors and protect us from those we need to walk away from. Bless us for those that serve in our community. We pray that you will make our way purposeful and our footsteps firm out of your goodness and love. Give us a heart of wisdom to hear your voice. Amen.
Amen.
We have one item on the agenda tonight. Would like to remind council that staff will be pausing intermediate to answer any questions. This is an informative session that serves as steps informing the 2023 annual budget.
Mayor,
And 23, yes?
can you do the roll call, please?
Oh, everybody's here? Nobody's missing. We'd like to remind council staff will be here, pausing intermittently to answer any questions. Looks like we got somebody new here for you to introduce here.
Yes,
The item is informational session that serves as a step in informing the fiscal 2023 annual budget, 23-27 capital improvement program. Again, please introduce yourself and your guest over there.
Sure. Mayor and members of council, Doug Sandstrom, Finance Director. Finance Director, and with me this evening is Ryan Biddle. He is our new budget manager. So you are going to be meeting him for the first time tonight, but hearing a lot from him over the next 6 months. Ryan comes to us from Pulte Homes. He was served as the controller of Pulte Homes for 7 years. So he has a lot of experience in development, a lot of experience in the Phoenix metro area associated with growth. And he has been a Goodyear resident for a while. So he gave up his commute to Scottsdale and came to work for us. So he's a great member of our team. He started on November 1st. So 3 months in, doing his first presentation to council, and I think you'll be fairly impressed by what he's been able to absorb over the last 3 months. So to start with, I just wanted to do a brief introduction on what we are here to talk about tonight. It's our fiscal year 2022 estimate. So we're going to look at how we compare to what our budget is and where we are to date now that we are 7 months into the fiscal year. And then we're going to go through our preliminary numbers for fiscal year 2023 and do our 5-year forecast for the general fund and look at our policies. The 5-year forecast for the general fund really helps us look at to make sure that the budget that's presented to council and what we're going to go through and look at is sustainable in the long term. We will go into some detail on our revenue assumptions that affiliate with our policy and some of the assumptions, and just get a gut check from council on whether the assumptions make sense at that higher level. And if there are any policy changes that might be desired for us to look into as we go through the process. Again, this is for the general fund only, and at the very end, after we've went through the revenues, after we've went through the policies, we'll give you a snapshot of what it looks like of how much money we have available to fund supplementals as well as new CIP items, what has been requested at that lump sum level, and to show you where we're starting out in that CIP process. So with that, I will turn it over to Ryan, and he will take it from there.
Thank you, Doug. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and it's a pleasure to be here. As a resident of Goodyear, like Doug said, I know it's a great time to be a part of this city, and I look forward to working with you hopefully for many years to come. With that being said, if you could direct your attention to the PowerPoints on the screens. As Doug mentioned, our agenda is to go over our fiscal year 2022 estimate, as well as our fiscal year 2023, kind of a preview, I would say. We're also going to look at our 5-year general fund forecast at a higher level in less detail than we will go into 22 and 2023. And I do want to make sure and highlight that these are estimates. They are projections. They are subject to change. So between now and the end of April, when we present our city manager's recommended budget, we will be sitting with the departments. We'll be sitting with the city manager's office. We'll be going through and scrubbing these numbers, allocating funding, and we will be deciding ultimately what gets presented. So a couple themes I want to make sure and mention that you will see throughout this presentation. The first relates to strong revenue growth. That is not necessarily something unique to Goodyear. We're seeing that all across the valley and in a lot of cases all across the United States. Nonetheless, it's a good position to be in. As it relates to construction, residential permits remain high on a year-over-year basis. However, our strong revenue growth is offset somewhat by our inflation and increasing costs. I looked at the Phoenix Metro Consumer Price Index per the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, and as of December 2021, that increased 1.7% over the previous 2 months and 9.7% from a year ago. If you look at the West region, that's increased 0.9% over the previous 2 months and 7.2% from a year ago. So either way you slice it, inflation is here and it looks like it's here to stay, unfortunately. So how does that relate to us in our budget that we will be presenting in a couple months? We want to continue to make sure that we're doubling down on our conservative nature, as well as all of our policies that we have already established. So in this slide, we take a look at single-family permits. Coming from the construction industry, we threw around the term softening the past couple months. And I think as you look out in this graph over the years, you will see that softening being reflected in the future years up to calendar year 2025 is what we show. So just to clarify, in the blue going from left to right, those are actual City of Goodyear permitting numbers. And the pink purplish color to the right of that comes from the Eller College of Management Economic Forecast, and that is for the Phoenix MSA. And what we did is we extrapolated those numbers to our Goodyear permits to come up with projections. So it looks a little bit like a bell curve, so to speak. However, if you look at the green line in the middle, you'll note that it actually is a 2.5% normalized growth over the 12 years shown on the slide. So I don't know about you, but if we were to say today we were going to have 2.5% growth in permits over the next 12 years, we would probably take that in a heartbeat. I also want to point out that that softening word We will continue to monitor between now and April any updated data that we receive. So our permits that we've received the past couple months, I would say fall into what we would consider softening bucket. So we will adjust our revenue projections accordingly if those numbers warrant it and continue for the next couple months. So the general fund, this is where we're focusing on. This is 100% of the pie right here, our ongoing revenue. So we're saying for fiscal year 2023, we project $153.5 million to be coming in what we consider ongoing revenue. Just for comparison purposes, our fiscal year 2022 adopted budget came in at $134.7 million. So this is about 14% higher. And our fiscal year 2022 estimate, which we have now, is at about $151.2 million. So we're coming in about 1.5% higher than our estimate. A couple interesting facts I thought that would be worth mentioning as it relates to some of the buckets you're seeing on your screen. Our sales tax estimates are coming in 19% higher than our 2022 adopted budget. Our state shared revenues are coming in 8% higher than our 2022 adopted budget. And our property taxes are coming in right in line with what we adopted. So if the last slide was the entire piece of the pie, so to speak, the biggest chunk of that comes from our non-construction sales tax. And we're projecting that to be $78.4 million for fiscal year 2023. Said differently, it's 51% of our ongoing revenue. We're forecasting 2023 to be 4.4% higher than our 2022 estimate that we currently have. And I want to note that when we say estimate, like Doug mentioned already, it's a combination of actuals and forecasted numbers. So our actuals for sales tax are actually coming in 21% higher, with our estimates being at about 4.5%. So you can note the conservatism that we're showing in our estimates versus what we're actually seeing. Something that changed last year that we're continuing going forward is each category that you see on your screen, we forecast at a category level as opposed to one lump sum number in sales tax. We believe it's a little more accurate, and we will continue to do that. I think it'll give us some interesting data points when we get some trending analysis coming on after a few years. Prior to that, we just looked at everything as one lump sum number. So a question that somebody might have, and I can tell you compared to 2021, our restaurant and bar category percentage is up 31% year over year. Our retail is up 35%. Hotel and motel is up 40%. And our online marketplace is down 37%. So that kind of makes sense. I think people are seeing that they're a little more bold. Hopefully they're getting over the pandemic. They're getting out of their house. They're spending money more at brick and mortar stores than they are sitting around at their home on their computer. So this slide is a different way to look at our sales tax. Very similar to what you saw with the green line showing what our normalized growth rate is. But I think this is a very good slide to point out our conservatism. If you look at our 2021 actuals compared to what we adopted for our fiscal year 2022 budget, you can see our actuals came in higher than what we ended up adopting. So if you look 2 bars over to the right from that, we project that our fiscal year 2022 estimate, when all is said and done, will be higher than what we actually end up adopting for fiscal year 2023. So that's, again, one way that I can point out that we continue to maintain a conservative policy with relation to sales tax. I think that's it. So this shows non-construction and construction, where the previous slide only showed non-construction sales tax. The next biggest piece of our ongoing general fund revenue comes from our state shared revenues. And that's $28.3 million that we project going into 2023. And that's 18% of our ongoing general fund revenue forecast. So this slide shows actuals over time as well as our projections going forward. We are projecting from the 3 different buckets: urban revenue sharing, which is our income tax, our vehicle license tax, and our state sales tax. We're showing anywhere from 2.5% to 3% growth in our projections. You can see our normalized year-over-year growth, which is driven primarily by the actuals, is around 5.5%. So the takeaways from here are that as long as we keep growing at a faster rate than our peers, we get a bigger chunk of the pie, so to speak, that gets distributed from the state. And you might be asking yourself, did the 2020 census impact our revenues that we got and continue to get? And the answer to that is yes. It actually impacted our revenues to the tune of about $3.4 million, which is a really good day. So when we created our 2022 adopted budget, that was from data from the Leagues of Arizona Cities and Towns given to us in March of 2021, and it did not have updated census data in it. Since then, our 2022 estimate does include updated census data, and that was received from the leagues in October of 2021, and that will be reflected in our numbers going forward. Another very important revenue source to talk about is our primary property tax, which we see programmed as $12.3 million going into fiscal year 2023. That makes up about 8% of our projected general fund ongoing revenues. So this slide kind of shows, or it does show, our assessed valuation going way back to 2009. And it shows how our assessed valuation has fluctuated coming out of the recession in 2008 and how we fully recovered now and what we project going into the future. We only show 2023 here on this particular slide, but just so you know, we assume a 4% growth rate of appreciation going forward. And we also take into account our forecast, the 2% cap on our total levy per Arizona statute. Another way to look at our primary property tax levy, this shows almost an inverse relationship with our total levy that we're collecting compared to our rate that we have for our primary property tax. And Doug will speak to this in just a minute, but this is consistent with policy of maintaining a combined property tax rate of $1.74 per every $100 of assessed value. And last but not least, as we talk about our ongoing revenues, our development-related revenue is coming in at about $13.4 million. Of that, 8.6 is related to ongoing, and we say is equal to our DSD expenditures. So we assume basically we're going to recover our cost of doing business for that particular department. And then everybody always asks, when you look at the general fund, what falls into the other bucket, because that's where you hide things, right, traditionally. So some of the big dollars that are sticking out there are our franchise taxes of $3.8 million, our ASTA, which is our Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority, I apologize, revenues, as well as our Parks and Rec revenues that we have programmed at about $1 million. So to summarize all of our ongoing revenues, we looked at sales tax, state shared revenues, primary property tax, on this slide, development-related revenue, and our other bucket. Of those sources, those combine to make almost 90% of our total ongoing revenue stream, which is the lifeblood of our city. So hopefully that helps everyone understand a little better what drives our growth and where the money's coming from.
Ryan, if I could just interject for 1 second on the ASTA revenues from the Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority. That $2.4 million that we're projecting, it gets us right back in line where ASTA's projections were pre-pandemic. So we had a couple of years where it was down. Our budget this year was actually $880,000, and you can see that we're right back to pre-pandemic levels from ASTA as well.
Thank you, Doug. So switching gears slightly, those were our ongoing revenues. Now we're going to look at our one-time revenues. So those are projected for fiscal year 2023 to be $112 million. And the majority of that comes from our fund balance, with the remaining amounts coming from our Camelback Corridor project. And that assumes that that project goes off as it was originally designed to. If by chance some of our partners back out, we'll adjust our revenue assumptions accordingly and pull those dollars out. The 12% of that is from our construction sales tax. Per our adopted policy last year, anything over $5.6 million goes into our one-time for construction. And then last but not least, the remaining dollars of our development-related services revenue goes into our one-time bucket.
When we look at our financial policies, Ryan just went through our one-time revenue sources. Everything that we've done in our financial policy, our revenue forecasts are driven by our financial policies. And so our financial policies and our revenue forecasts are reconciled and compliant with one another. I've listed up here not all of our financial policies, but some of the major ones that we do look at and go through on a regular basis. The number one thing when we develop our budget is to make sure that our ongoing costs are supported by ongoing revenue. It's okay to use ongoing revenue for one-time purposes, but not the other way around. And we make sure that we are doing that. For a rainy day fund, we make sure that we have 15% of our general operating revenues set aside in case of an emergency, and we set that aside right off the bat. For fiscal year 23, we're looking at an increase there from $19 million up to $22 million based on our revenue increases. Enterprise funds, when they come forward, will be presented as self-sufficient. And Ryan went through the property tax to show you what the impact on the primary was. As our levy goes up, our primary rate actually goes down as we collect the maximum primary property tax. With the difference, we use that for general obligation bonds and paying for debt service. What we are planning to do over the course of the next couple of years is we are issuing the last of our voter authorized debt the current year, and that is associated with the police building and the fire station. Our plan is to make sure we structure the debt so that we keep that property tax rate level for the next couple of years as we go into the potential of having a bond election in the 2024 November election. November of 2024 was selected because by state law it has to be in November of a general election. So we'd have 24 or 26 would be our next opportunities for it. So we're going to have it set up so that we would be positioned to issue additional debt if the voters say yes to whatever bond issue comes forward. If not, then everything would adjust down according to what debt service schedules are at that time. You just saw our 5-year forecast. We went through that. We've got our asset management reserves fully funded in the expenditures that you'll see shortly. The two bottom ones I have highlighted. The first one, growth pays for itself. We are not recommending any types of changes on growth pays for itself. But one of the things you'll be seeing in the CIP when we come forward is more projects where we're going to be building streets ahead of growth or recommending that they be built ahead of growth. In so doing, we would put together a cost recovery ordinance so when the growth actually does come, the developer would pay us back that portion of it. There's a 15-year window on that, so 15 years from the time we improve it. If growth hasn't happened by then that cost recovery would go away, but we will be selecting it to make sure that it actually does have some impact for us. Because it is dependent upon development, how we pay for that in the short term is general funds. And then that would be reimbursed when the cost recovery happens. That falls right in line with the way the policy is currently written, so there's no recommendations to change that policy. The second one is the only recommended change we have in the financial policy, and that is to increase the construction sales tax that goes to ongoing from $5.6 million to $6.1 million. Right, if you could go to the next slide, please. That recommendation is following the exact same thought process that we have done for the last 4 fiscal years, and that is we take the 5 lowest years in the last 10 years, take that average, and then you say that's the minimum amount of construction sales tax that we should see on an ongoing basis. So we would count that as ongoing revenue, with all the rest of it being one time. So to keep that methodology consistent, we are recommending that the policy be changed from 5.6 to 6.1 million. Current fiscal year, fiscal year 22, this is the time of the year where we're working in 3 different fiscal years, so it gets kind of confusing on which one I'm talking about. For fiscal year 2022, the policy is at 5.6 million, and we actually only used about 4.6 of that for ongoing purposes. So just because the policy says we can use it for ongoing doesn't necessarily say that we will use it for ongoing. So the recommendation go to the 6.1. We do review that annually because The one thing about math is it's pretty consistent, and you can see how high our construction numbers are getting in the next years in 2021. As those lower numbers drop off in the 2012, 2013, that 6.1, the 5 lowest average, is going to start creeping up pretty fast. And we're going to be needing to look at that on an annual basis to make sure that we don't end up with too high of a number going to ongoing. So with that, are there any questions on the construction sales tax or financial policies, or any kind of discussion on any of the other financial policies that council would want us to look at as we go through the budget process?
Questions over here?
I have a question.
Councilman Kano?
Thank you. Doing a great job, Brian. When we're talking about the softening of the single-family rentals, it doesn't seem that it takes into consideration all the multifamily growth that's going on, because certainly there's construction's nonstop, but we don't necessarily categorize that, it looks like. So would you attribute the softening to the increase in multifamily?
I would say that the softening coming from the construction background is kind of across the board. I know that being in the construction industry, there are a multitude of factors that were creating bottlenecks, both on the horizontal side, so the land development, as well as the vertical side on the construction of houses themselves. We're seeing labor shortages. We're yet to get our contract labor back up to the levels we had pre-2008. I also know that we were seeing shortages. Pulte Homes, where I came from, is I think the 4th or 5th largest publicly traded home builder in the United States. And there were times where we could not get, and we still, as of about a week ago when I checked in with them, could not get certain everyday materials in that you need to build a home. We were having to go and purchase those from a retail store to install them into homes versus having to get them from our suppliers because they couldn't get them to us in a timely manner. And also, in addition to that, the costs going up. A lot of home builders in the valley have their pipelines out to where if they don't close any more deals between now and the next couple of years, they have enough land already bought to meet what their projection should be. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but I would say they are related, multifamily and single-family permits, because the supply of the contract labor kind of goes over both different, as well as the availability of materials spanned over both different types of building.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Campbell?
Thank you. Doug, I have a question, or maybe it might go to Ryan. I don't know. It's a toss-up. So our last year's budget was 134.7.
Yes.
And we had 153.5. So the money that's extra is the money that we can use to allocate after we adopt our budget, correct?
That's a very good question. And you're taking some of my thunder from some
sorry.
future slides, but yes, we will address that exactly, yes. So, but yes, that is the general assumption, that anything that is left over is what you then have to allocate for new projects and new ongoing expenditures, yes.
Okay.
We can touch on, again, preliminarily, how much money we think we have available to do that.
Okay, and now this question is probably more for Doug. We have enough money, bonding authority, to finish the police station, right?
Yes, we do.
So we don't have to hold it another year or two.
Correct.
Okay, that's really important
Yes.
to me. Sorry. And then my last question is, our sales tax is up 19%, you said?
Our estimate is up 19% versus what we adopted last year, yes.
Is a lot of that internet sales, or it's just that we're all out buying like crazy?
I think, for lack of a better term, I think people are using money that was been provided probably by stimulus through the government and things like that. They have excess money. I think I read somewhere that the average American has more savings in their bank account than the past X amount of years. So there is excess dollars available that are being pumped into the economy.
You're right, we do, because of COVID and everything else, you know.
Yeah.
This is our rainy day, I guess.
Yeah.
We've been saving it, so now we're going to go spend it. But, well, I'm excited because it sounds like, once again, we have anticipated what monies come in and then budgeted very conservatively, so we've never gone over, but we have had a surplus that we're able to even do more for our city. So I
Correct.
appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
Vice
And
Mayor
one other
Hampton?
thing, if I could, one other thing on the sales tax collection, not only people spending their savings and so on, as inflation goes up, the cost of materials goes up.
Yeah.
The sales tax is a rate that's applied against that. So we're going to see more sales tax generated as inflation goes up as well.
You're right, yeah. Are we getting gasoline taxes a little bit? We wouldn't get much because our tax is so low.
Yeah, it's distributed through HERF, the Highway User Revenue Fund. That's part of the gas tax.
And is it staying the same?
It went up slightly from prior years.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yeah, great presentation so far. I do appreciate the conservative policies that we have. So, and I do appreciate growth paying for growth, but we definitely need to have the streets. So I'm glad that I know we've been focused on that. So it's good to see that in the policy here as well. And then I guess I would just bring up if there's anything else that we think that we need other than streets to be more proactive on, like water or other things that just that we might want to think about. And then how much bonding capacity you think? You said we'll free up some in 20. You want to be ready in case we need that in 2024?
Yeah, as we go through the budget process a little bit more, when we come back to you, we'll have a lot more information about what the rates look like and so on.
Okay. And then yeah, I appreciate you keeping an eye on the construction sales tax increase, because look at the chart. It's obvious that it could double or so in the next 10 years or however that looks like. So, and I know when we first set that up, we wanted specifically to have 2008, I believe, or 2006 in that as well. So, but I appreciate you keeping an eye on it and bringing it back to us year after year. So, and then I had just a random question. It's probably something very simple, but when you said the Parks and Rec generates $1 million, what does that normally come from?
That comes from our fees that we, primarily from our new rec center that we just built. So we're still kind of fine tuning exactly what makes sense to throw into the budget, and as well as what's, I think the director actually sent out an email on suggestions, but as far as what goes into the budget and vetting through that'll all be vetted out through the next probably month or two before we present it.
Okay. I thought that was the rec center was a zero, it's paid for its enterprise type.
The rec center is not set up as an enterprise fund, but we've got the revenue from memberships, and then you got program revenue, so all the Parks and Rec programs and so on. The Parks and Rec budget itself is going to be far in excess of $1 million. We show the revenue and then we show the full expenditure as opposed to the net cost.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. So, all right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Stipp?
Thank you. If I remember, the number is it's between 30 and 40%, I think, is what we offset from Parks and Rec. Does that sound about right? I think we have a cost recovery of about 30%.
I understand the question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, though.
But just for anyone listening,
Correct.
we knowingly are not, it's not a dollar for dollar recovery, and that was intentional. But and I'm probably getting way ahead of where we're at. And I've been sitting here trying to figure out how to talk about this, because when we had our retreat back in October, November, there was not a concern about inflation as there is today. And these construction sales tax dollars are going to be significantly impacted by that. If something catastrophic occurs in the economy, we're going to go back to those numbers that are on the left side of the screen as opposed to the numbers that are in the middle of the screen. So the difference between 5.6 and 6.1 is not a lot. So I'm not alarmed by that right now, but I think as we look forward, hopefully the collective us are keeping that in mind. And in that vein, when we did talk at the retreat about designating some of the current revenues, not returning the tax, because that clearly is not the majority of the council's wish, but doing something with a dedicated amount of tax to either forward public transportation or do something. And I'm hoping that we see that as the budget process unfolds going forward. It was not in the material that you presented to us and that you gave us a week ahead of time, nor is it in the slides. And as we go through this, you're hearing the theme of we've got a lot of revenue and we've got a lot of opportunity and we've got a lot of things we want to do, but at some point in time, we have to turn back to the residents and say, hey, this is your money. Let's return some of it back to you. So whether we do that in not requesting a public safety tax or a transit tax and using the existing funding that we have to offset that, I think that garnered some support at the retreat as a better idea than going out for a tax and then reducing a different tax. So I'm hoping to see that as we go forward, as opposed to, oh my God, look at all this money we've got, we can go crazy. And I know I'm in the minority on this council in that belief, but this is a very positive presentation tonight, and we have a lot to be very grateful and thankful for in this city. I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that perhaps as inflation starts to rise, we start thinking about how do we, not in services, but in actual dollars, how do we return this to the residents who are here? And I'll probably be done for the night. I'm not going to make that a promise, but
Not a promise?
not a promise, but that could potentially be all I have to say.
All right. Councilmember Loretano.
Thank you. Thank you both for a very informative presentation. I think Councilmember Cip hit it right on the head. This is very, very positive, and I think our citizens need to know that. The 9.7% inflation rate that we're running at now, that is obviously very concerning. For our CIP and those projects that we have that we've already priced out, do we now go back and reprice those out at the higher inflation rate, or how do we do that? It might be a Doug question, I'm not sure.
Yeah, as we're constantly looking at projects throughout the year, the budget time right now is one of the great times to really do a deep dive on everything. So yes, you will see projects as presented in the budget in a couple months that will have increased for doing the exact same thing, purely because of that inflation that you're talking about. And that's part of what we'll be vetting through over the next couple months.
And then I have a question on the state shared revenues. I know that there was the negotiations to give us the higher amount with the flat tax, but then the flat tax went away. So how do we figure in which specific amount do we use in our projections?
So the initial legislation, as I understand it, was to hold cities neutral, unharmed. We've currently been told there's a bunch of bills in process that could change that either direction. So as of right now, it's anybody's guess as to how that turns out. In our numbers, we've assumed that we've reduced our assumptions slightly in the out years to the tune of something that would be pretty insignificant. Okay. However, and we plan on keeping that assumption consistent until we know one way or another when something passes that will directly affect and change our decision.
And then with the state share, not the state share, the property taxes, with the levy, we max out our levy, correct? And then I think a lot of our citizens don't realize that the current owner of property, that can't be raised more than what's the 2%?
Correct.
2%.
Yeah, the total levy.
So all that new property and apartments and multifamily that's coming online, that is taxed at the current value. So it's a kind of I don't want to say a higher rate, but we actually get more through those, correct? Does that make sense?
Correct. Yeah, it's when a new property comes onto the rolls, it's basically at market value as opposed to that artificially subdued rate that the existing property is.
So if you've lived in Goodyear for a while, your increases can only be 2%. Correct. But the new house built is going to be at a higher.
Correct.
Not so subdued, I guess is the way to say it. Now, if I sell my home in Goodyear, the new owner, they're still at the 2%, or are they now at the new market rate? How does that work?
I will verify, but I'm fairly certain it's still at that same assessed valuation, that it's owner agnostic. It's about the property being there.
Okay, so it's just new stuff, new builds?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to check on that. And then as to what Councilmember Stipp brought out, I do remember that conversation, and I do agree with that, you know, the roads, those are ways to give back to the community or other needs, water, other needs along those lines. I think those are some really good things to keep our eyes on. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation, and I also appreciate we've got traffic issues. And I appreciate the capital budget where you're looking to try to get some of those scallop streets fixed and then get it ahead of the development, in which at that point we got reimbursements that we can get back from the development because traffic's growing at such a rate. I think being proactive, taking care of that is very important. That's where some of that money, I believe some of that excess money should go to fix those type of things as far as that. And I'm looking forward for the other slides because I think part of it, when we're looking at new bodies, and I'm always worried about inflation. I think it's here to stay personally. There's too many forces out there, whether it's chain, whether it has to do with the cutback in gasoline and oil production, because everything kind of drives off of that, and labor shortages, and then for some reason, people just not going back to work. That you've got supply demand on labor as well. I think that's here for a while. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's not all the way through 22. So I want us to be careful when we start pricing some of the things we've got going to make sure that we take that into consideration. Because if you don't, you're going to be short as you get in there. And I'd rather you be conservative on those increases as well. Again, thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Ryan, take it over.
All right, so moving to the expense side of the coin, we said we dabble on those a little bit. So our revenues drive what we can spend. So what actually makes up our expenditures that we have? If we look at our ongoing, the majority of that is related to personnel. If you add up the three biggest buckets on the chart on your screen, personnel, contractual services, and our transfers essentially to subsidize our ballpark and HERF operations, you're looking at greater than about 95% of our ongoing expenditures just from those three different categories. So some of the assumptions that go on behind those numbers, Doug's hit on some of those already. We're financial policy compliant. We have our asset management plan, and those transfers were based on what we put together last year. They will be in the process of updating for our 2023 plan when we present in a couple months. We have assumptions included in those numbers for MOU as well as adjustments for non-sworn employees. And we've got general expenditure increases of 3.5% assumed. Again, that's what we have as of right now. That doesn't mean that's what we will end up on. There will be further discussion. We're welcome to all the feedback that you have, and I hear from a couple different ones, a couple different council members that inflation is definitely something we want to not sell ourselves short on. So that's duly noted. And then last but not least, in our expenditure assumptions, we have our CIP operating costs. So for projects that are ending in the fiscal year, that we now have ongoing costs associated with those are also been taken into account. So if you look at our 5-year general fund forecast kind of on a line graph here, this breaks down and is a very easy way to see that we basically are showing that we're solvent. We have the ability to stay solvent. We're bringing in more, we're assuming we're going to bring in more revenue than we actually are going to spend over the next 5. There's actually 6 years on here. Last year we showed you through 2027, so we're going to show you through 2028 this year. You might ask why 2023 the expenses seem so low compared to what we have from our sources, but that number typically rises, and you can see that delta probably shrink before the end of the year comes between now and when June hits us. We can look at the exact same thing from a one-time perspective. Again, financial policy compliant. Our CIP that we have is based on our CIP that we adopted last year, our 5-year plan, 2022 through 2026. And again, our asset management is based on our previous year asset management plan that will be updated going forward. So this is the one that you'll look at and somebody will say, it looks like we have money to spend, right? You can see that gap between our sources that we have and our uses that we project on spending. And we'll get into that here in just a second as to what that gap looks like and what are some of the recommendations that we're seeing coming in from the departments as far as where those dollars can go. So this is the slide, Councilmember Campbell, that you were probably referring to in your question. So I think we brought this one up last year for the first time, and I know there's a lot going on there, but if you look on the left side of the screen, you can see all of our resources broken down into a lot of the categories that we've already covered. On the right side, you can see the uses, again, broken down into categories that we've talked about. But I want to draw your attention to where it says available after base budget. And if you go to the far right there, you can see there's an 11.9 number, roughly $12 million. That's what we're saying after we cover our base budget ongoing expenses. That's what we say we have left to spend. Factor in the new operating expenses from CIP projects that will be going into play, and that number reduces around to about $11 million. So that sounds great, but if you look at what's being requested, if we were to accept everything today and just blanket say we're good to go, we wouldn't have enough money to sustain that. So that makes our job, that otherwise we just sit around and do nothing for the next 2 months. We actually have work to do to vet through all those requests to make sure that we're choosing the amounts that move forward that actually make sense for the best use of those funds.
And if I could add to that, just to put kind of this in context, I went and looked at our presentation from last fiscal year, and where we were as we entered the budget process last fiscal year was that we had $10 million available for allocation. This year we've got about $11 million. We had requests last year of $21.6 million, and this year we have requests of $17.4 million. So going into the budget year, when you see a $6.3 million deficit, it's actually exactly where we want to be, and that's a good year when you start like that. So it's very doable to get this back to into balance, and that's what, as Ryan said, we'll be spending the next 2 months really working through, and it's real similar to last year at this time.
This slide shows exactly what we just talked about, except for the one-time versus the ongoing. So resources on the left, uses on the right. You can see available about 46 million, and that was that delta between the two lines, the sources and uses on the one time. However, the requests come into about 53 million. So again, if we were to just blanket say we're going to do everything that we want to do, we feel like we need to do, then we would again be in the hole. And this is a typical spot to be. I believe Doug said he only once in his entire career has there never been the amount of requests exceeding what we have available.
Yeah, and if we look compared to last year, we had $39 million of one-time available, and we had requests of $42 million. So quite a bit closer. This year we have significantly higher on the request side, and that's really because of the streets projects that we'll be working through. And that's probably the focal point as we go through the next couple of months is really going to be on when I'm looking at the capital projects is the timing of those projects, the resources that we have available, and that's both dollar value as well as staffing availability. Whether there's other funding available, and then at the bottom line, it would be then priorities of how we fund those things. So it's a lot of the projects are, you look at the list and you're like, these are all great, but we can't do everything, and you got to start spreading it around and prioritizing, and that's what we're going to be seeing.
So that ties into our very last slide here. So what are we seeing from the departments? We tried to summarize some of the larger buckets. So transportation, scallop streets, which Doug just mentioned. City facilities, going into FTEs to support the city growth and the additional programs we'd like to supply for our citizens. And then more of a centralization and standardization of projects. We're the 9th fastest growing city in the United States. We don't want to outgrow ourselves and lose track of what's going on. We want to grow smart. We want to be able to provide data for you so we can make informed business decisions and grow smartly going into the future. And I believe that's it. Are there any questions?
Sure. Start on this side. Councilmember Stipp?
It's just a question. It's not a statement. Doug, the fund balance from at the end of this fiscal year, the quote-unquote unspent general fund, that does not come into play until the 2024 budget.
A portion of it comes into play for the 23 budget because we have estimates in there where our estimates are exceeding on the revenue side. So anything that we forecasted out in our estimates on both the revenue and expenditure side will go into our estimated fund balance. However, we estimate conservative, so we believe the revenues are going to come in higher than that. Expenditures will come in lower. That delta will then not impact until 24.
Okay, so is it possible to go back? Sure. 2 slides, I think. I did not see it on this slide because that would be one-time money, which we would use going forward. So where does that show up here? Does that show up in transfers? Is that just kind of lumped all together? Or are we potentially looking at even more one-time dollars? That's where I'm driving.
We would, if you go back one more slide, Ryan. So when we look at, there we go. If we look at our estimate on the left-hand side there for resources, where we're projecting $153 million of resources. That minus our expenses on the other side there of our estimate of $141 million is what we're basing the budget off of. If our revenues come in at $160 million, that $7 million is not shown anywhere on here, and that's anything that's not shown, that's the piece that ends up in 24.
That's what I was driving at. So based on these figures today, we won't see a bump. We won't see a bump this year. It'll be following. And
correct.
I think it's important for those that are trying to understand what we're doing to see how that plays forward as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's a really good point to make too, because when we show our 5-year forecast for one-time resources, that unintended bump that we don't have forecasted in there isn't there. So that's really going to give you more money on the one-time side as we go forward. And it all is due to our conservative budgeting practices.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Loretano?
No, I just appreciate this. And I look forward to seeing when we get a little more detail. This is very good high level, and I think it really helps our citizens know what's going on and that we're in a great position. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yeah, same thing as Councilwoman Loretano. It's a great presentation. Definitely does help. I think there's a lot of different buckets that citizens don't always know where all the money comes from. So it's good to show how that is different than maybe the private sector as well. So thank you.
Councilmember Campbell?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I have a question about the FTEs. I'm assuming by saying the FTEs to support city growth, that would include our ambulance service, that would include if we expanded Mobile or whatever, that's part of your growth?
So ambulance service was something that was approved in prior year's budget, so that the full service of the full cost of the ambulance is built into the numbers that you have seen here. When it comes to like expanded service down in Mobile, anything else like that would be in that fiscal year 2023 budget request line item. So that's part of the request that the department put in.
That you'll be talking to the departments on?
Correct.
Because I'm sure every department has requests. We
Yes,
need
they
more
do.
police officers, and we need this, that, and the other. So, okay, great. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Kano?
This budget's been an interesting process over the last couple of years with the pandemic and just facing so much uncertainty. And now we have inflation and the many factors that the mayor brought up. And so, but I know at the beginning of your presentation, Ryan, you asked for a gut check on our assumptions and any policy changes. And I think we've got very sound financial policies. And I think your assumptions are good. I always like that conservative. Let's just take it easy on the numbers until we know. And so I think that we have a very good practice and that's served the city well. Thank you.
Yeah, to echo Councilmember Kano, I think what helps get us through a lot of these things, whether it was the Great Recession or even the pandemic, we have really solid fiscal conservative policies. We want to keep on that on track. Bond committees, have you penciled out, because it's going to have to match the CIP request timelines to get the committee in to review and then get it on the ballot? Is that being processed right now or part of this?
We have a preliminary timeline laid out for it, and it actually, when it comes to a Citizens Bond Committee, it is about a year away before we do it. So next year at this time, we'll really be looking to start that process with the CIP that's developed and so on, because the actual election itself would not take place until November of 2024, and we'd have a call to election about 6 months prior to that.
Okay, so you've already started mapping
Correct.
some of that. Okay, great. Well, with that, anybody else have anything to add? Well, then we have one communication item tonight.
Thank you, guys.
The item is presentation on the Goodyear Arts and Culture Celebration, celebrating Black History Month. Please introduce yourself when you come up here to the podium.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Guyleen Oslansky. I'm the Arts and Culture Administrator for the city, and I'm really excited to be with you tonight to share with you the plans that the Goodyear Arts and Culture Commission has for celebrating Black History Month. So we have been very fortunate in the fact that we have been able to partner for the last 7 years with Goodyear resident Norma Cunningham and her husband and artist Michael Cunningham. They developed a program called Vision and Sound, an African American experience. And over these past 7 years, they have brought a multitude of artists to our community, musicians. They've expanded to bring in literary artists, culinary artists. This program has grown across the West Valley, and even this year, it's even gone beyond our borders. And this program has gone up north, and Sedona Arts is also featuring programs and exhibits. So it's really exciting to see how over these years, how this has grown. So bringing it back though to our home and to Goodyear, we're excited. We've been able to bring in workshops through our creative aging program. We have upcoming lectures at our Goodyear branch library. All these programs are free for the public to come and enjoy. We have a concert that's going to be at our Goodyear Recreation Center on the 24th. It's going to be a jazz concert. And not only can you come out and enjoy the music from Ratio Band, but we have Black-owned food trucks that'll be there and artisan booths. So it's going to be a great evening to come out and enjoy some time with your family. And one of the things that's really near and dear to me is the fine art exhibits that are part of the program. This year, we do have an exhibit up in our Goodyear branch library. 6 of the artists that are featured there, they're incredible, 2 of which are Goodyear residents, Michael Cunningham as well as Patricia Bohannon. And I do encourage everyone to get out to the library to come take a look at this exhibit. You're going to see various artistic styles and themes and just storytelling about each of these artists and their lives. And it's just a really incredible, incredible exhibit. In addition to having the exhibit that's in the library, we also have a virtual gallery. And the virtual gallery is cool because not only can you see the artwork that's in the Goodyear branch library, but also the artworks that are up in Sedona that are exhibited there in that gallery. You can see those as well in our virtual gallery. So if you're unable to, make it up north to see that exhibit, you can follow that QR code that's on the slide or visit goodyearaz.gov/arts and you can check out the virtual gallery. So, we just are very excited to have these programs, these cultural opportunities for our community. We're very fortunate to have residents like the Cunninghams that have worked with us to help develop this program, and we are so happy that we've been able to grow with them to offer so many incredible opportunities. With that concludes my presentation, and I'd like to turn it over to you for any comments.
Start over here on the right side. Councilmember Kano.
Thank you so much, Guyleen. Norma, I'm so happy to see you here tonight. The work that you and Michael have done to promote the arts has just been tremendous. And this is such a testament to the work and your passion for the project. I think about how it started out, I think with just a few events, maybe over a week, and now it's a 6-7 week endeavor, and you've expanded your partnerships tremendously, including ASU and others. And you bring in, we've got tremendous local talent, regional talent, and then you pull in other artists as well. So this is a very shining star for Goodyear. We thank you, Norma, and thank you, Guyleen, for partnering, ensuring that Goodyear has been partnering to keep this program alive and vibrant, and even export it out to other parts of the state. Thank you.
Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you. Colleen, is this just for the month of February?
Thank you for that question. So the lectures and the concert are all throughout the month of February. The exhibit in the library will be up through April 4th. So you'd have time to make sure you go in, see it, go take a look once or twice or 3 times, because it is a beautiful exhibit.
Well, I'm at the library almost every other day, and I've seen them, and I see something different every time I go in, so it's really kind of special. I am really excited to see this, and I'm really, I want the residents to know that where I live, we have an arts and crafts gallery where we have a lot of Black artists that are featured all year round there because they sell their wares. And it's really exciting to see the talent actually being showcased. So thank you so very much for putting this together. It looks lovely in the library, and I can't wait to see it in our new library.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor Hampton.
Yeah, likewise. I think it's a great art and history to demonstrate those things in the library. But I know my family was there just the other day. We were touring all the art that was there as well, showing my kids. That was great. And you said the jazz concert, is that on the Thursday?
It is. It's on a Thursday night at the Goodyear Recreation Campus. It'll be out there. Bring your lawn chair or a blanket. It'll be a beautiful evening for a concert.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great to have. And will some of these things be carried over to the Juneteenth celebration we're having as well? Or I know it's totally different events and things.
It is a different event, but yes, we are working to get a group of community members together to make some planning. But I can definitely see that some of these elements where, you have multiple pieces where we have exhibits and different educational opportunities will definitely probably come in as a big part of Juneteenth celebration.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Stipp.
Well, we're running out of things to say thank you for, but in all seriousness, though, Norma, you are a staple and a pillar in the community. You are always here. So, and for a change, I get to actually see somebody, because when I'm sitting over there, I get blocked by the pole of the podium. So, but in any case, just, thank you. And thank you for supporting that and continuing to educate us as necessary. And I think to Councilmember Campbell's point, just moving these, and the vice mayors, moving these types of educational components beyond just the quote unquote designated month is so important. We have Martin Luther King, Dr. King's birthday celebration in January, which is, a good kickoff, and then we need to continue that throughout the year. So thank you for all of your work.
Councilmember Loretano.
Well, thank you very much, Guyleen, for bringing this to the city. And Norma, I can't see you because I can look this way and see you. Thank you and Michael so much for all the years and all the hard work you've done to bring these events to our city and our community. You guys are truly stars of our community, and we do appreciate it. I really do look forward to this, and I'm so glad that you can have all these type of events now with, the pandemic subsiding, that we can hear the music and celebrate and learn together. So I really do appreciate that, and I echo what everyone says. I'd like to see more of these year round. All different cultures, all different, aspects of culture. I just think these are so enjoyable, and it's such a great experience. It's fun, it's educational, and it's just a way to all be a community together and learn about everybody and everybody's differences, and it's just such a fun time. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to these events. So thank you, and thank you, Norma. Michael's not back there, is he? No. Okay, I can't see. I've got posts, so thank you, but tell him thank you very much.
It's nice seeing you again, Norma. Question, dates. When will the artwork, what's the period of time that the artwork will start and finish?
Mayor, the exhibit is up currently in the Goodyear Branch Library, and it'll be on exhibit until April 4th.
April 4th, okay. The jazz concert, what date is that?
That is on February 24th.
Okay, 2/24, okay, gotcha. Thank you, and again, thanks, Norma. All right, that's it? We have anything else?
That's
All
it.
right, then.
Thank you very much, everyone.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Now is the time for citizens who would like to address the city council on any non-agenda item within jurisdiction of the City of Goodyear Council. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Does anybody in the audience wish to speak on a non-agenda item? I see none. I'll go on. Will the city clerk please read the consent agenda items 3 through 9 by title only?
Number 3, approval of minutes. Number 4, adopt resolution number 2202-2207, providing notice of a primary election on August 2nd, 2022, and a general election November 8th, 2022, if necessary. Designating the place and beginning date to distribute candidate packets, designating the last date for candidates to file nominating papers, designating the dates that voter registration closes, authorizing the city manager or her designee to enter into all agreements to effectuate election services, and ordering the city clerk to publish this call of election. Number 5, approve the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Goodyear and the Department of Public Safety to participate in the Vehicle Theft Task Force. Number 6, approve the construction phase services award for CIP Project 35003, Police Building Phase 2. Number 7, approve the Citrus Park Phase 1 Water Line and Emergency Services Access Easement. Number 8, approve the final plat for Citrus Park Phase 1 subject to stipulations. Number 9, adopt the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System Fiscal Year 2023 Pension Funding Policy. That's it.
Does anybody on council wish to remove an item? Yes, Councilmember Stipp.
Mayor, I'd like, and I should have given the manager a heads up, and I apologize. Just for information on the public safety pension funding, that is such good news. I don't want it captured in the consent agenda, so I would like a very brief update on that so we can get that out in the public, because that,
Yeah, should we bring it up now?
all I need is a presentation we can do, then we can vote on all of them.
Okay, come on up. Just please introduce yourself for the
And I
audience.
apologize way ahead of time for doing this to Doug at the last minute. I'll have to make it 2 coffees now that I owe Doug for.
I am keeping track.
I know.
Doug Sandstrom, Finance Director. The item before you tonight is the adoption of the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System Policy. It's something we are required by state law to do on an annual basis. If council recalls, back in May of 2021, so during fiscal year 21, we submitted a $24 million prepayment to the Public Safety Retirement Fund in order to buy down our unfunded liabilities. Fiscal year 2023 is the first year the impact of that buy down will be felt in our rates. And what is great when we look at the rate structure that is going in here, we see our rates dropping.
Excuse me, Doug, can you pull that just a little bit closer to you?
Yep, sorry about that. I can hear myself perfectly, so I couldn't tell. Our rates dropped from about 27% down to the low 20s. What that translates to in dollars for next fiscal year with all of our current employees is about a $2 million a year annual operational savings by putting that one-time funding into it. So we got our pensions up to now in 87%, I believe it is, and 86% for police for funded level, and for fire it's 89, with a combined total of just under 89%. Anything over 80% is considered well funded, so the 90% is really where you want to be. You do not necessarily want a policy 100% funded, because at the end of the day it is actuarial, it is forecast for what it's going to do. So it's a very strong, healthy pension system, and that $24 million one-time drop into that really helps a lot on the operational side and for the strength of the system.
That's great news.
So a follow-up question to that, and we paid and we were able to do that with one-time money.
Correct.
Last year. So this whole discussion that we had an hour ago is better use of our funds, et cetera. So anyone who's watched this whole thing, God love you, that's how we move from one piece to another, how we use these for the betterment of the community without without having these long-term impacts. So
Exactly.
thank you again. Apologize profusely for not giving you a heads up on that.
No problem.
But you did a good job.
Thank you, Doug. All right, with that, let's see, we did that piece. Can I have a motion and a second to approve items 3 through 9?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Yeah, here. Does council have any comments, commendations, or reports on current events or requests for future items? Go ahead.
I don't know if this is really a request or not, and sorry, I should have probably told Julie this ahead of time. I've noticed, I've seen in the paper that Phoenix and Chandler are doing some stuff to help encourage building up some more affordable homes. Because if you look at some of our home prices now, I think you really can't get a home in the Goodyear area for under $450. I mean, I was just looking on the realtor websites, and it's very, very difficult. And if we want to bring retail into our city and more restaurants, and teachers, where are we going to have people live? I mean, it's getting crazy, and it's not just Goodyear. I mean, it's the Valley. So I don't know if that's a presentation, a paper, or just to get information. And then I heard Chandler and Phoenix are trying to do something to encourage that. So any help would be great.
Yeah, if I could just address that. We do have a presentation, I believe it's in March 21st. We'll be having a work session talking about housing and what's going on in not just Goodyear, but the region. So I think that will be the great beginning of that conversation.
Yes, Councilmember Campbell.
Julie, I apologize. I haven't had lunch with you yet to tell you this one. I read in, I think, the Independent, that I can't read because I don't take the subscription and it's just a teaser headline, that I believe Litchfield Park had adopted some ordinances about the rentals, the Airbnbs, and I'm wondering what they're doing. Is that something we should be doing?
Great. We're having a work session on February 28th on short-term rentals. And so that is another upcoming conversation. So both very timely.
Thank you.
Anybody else? The only thing I want to add is we're going to probably have to do something about affordable housing. There's a really ugly bill down at the State House right now that I just signed on this morning that hopefully we could kill, which would take our zoning rights and everything away from local jurisdiction. That's not a good way to go. So we got to figure out how we address this issue before the state does something to us that we really don't want them to do. So I'm glad to hear that's coming in on March. With that being said, does the city manager have anything to report?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share some of the good news from our Heart and Soul event, which was last weekend. It did return in person, and it was last Saturday, February 5th. More than 600 participants and 1,500 attendees came out to celebrate Heart Health Month as a community. The race featured a new route, the 10K, in addition to the popular 5K and 1 mile routes. The pet-friendly event included live music, a food truck, and fueling station with free snacks and beverages, commemorative giveaways, and helpful vendor booths. The Heart and Soul's presenting sponsor, Franklin Pierce University, not only helped by providing the commemorative shirts, but also connected us with more than 30 volunteers to help work the event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move up here so everybody can see me better.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I assume the next item we're moving on to is the possible executive session to discuss appointment of the new city council member. This is going to be, is anticipated to be held in executive session as permitted by Arizona law. Arizona law, of course, requires most items to be discussed in a public setting. However, certain categories can be held in a private, non-public session, including personnel matters, which this is a personnel matter. Under Arizona public or open meeting law, when you're proposing to have a personnel discussion, you notify all the parties that you anticipate discussing of the executive session, and they have a right under Arizona law to have their portion of a personnel discussion to be held in a public meeting as opposed to an executive session. All the candidates that submitted applications were given written notification of the requirements under Arizona law and of their opportunity to have their application discussed in public. And we had one candidate ask that their application be discussed publicly, and that was Mr. Chad Dodd. So before council adjourns into executive session, if council wishes to discuss Mr. Dodd's application, that would need to be discussed in the public meeting this evening. And so this would be the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. I kind of throw that out for anybody sitting here on the dais. Anybody wish to discuss that application?
Okay.
See none? Thank you. With that, vote may be held to call an executive session for the following pursuant to ARS 38-431.03 A1, discussion of personal matters related to the city council recruitment. Would like a motion and a second to go into executive